Doom, doom, doom. And if you threw a party, invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from me. And the card attached would say, thank you for being a friend. Yay. Nice singing, Cam. And if you throw a party, invited everybody. The biggest gift. I'm not doing that today. I'm not hitting that note. I'm not gonna rear back and hit it today. It's perfect time. Feed your body, feed your mind, keep your muscles going strong, keep you going all day long now. Okay. Wait. Go. Level up. Okay, friends, welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I am your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you are so glad that you have. Welcome back to week 4, the final week of reading for Marriage Be Hard. I just want to tell you, go ahead, friend, pat yourself on the back. This was, because what are we now? We're like over halfway through Becoming, and you have read the most misunderstood women of the Bible, and now you finished Marriage Be Hard, all in the time span of what, like a month, almost a month. So that's like 3 books in almost a month. So pat yourself on the back. Very proud of you. Congratulations to you. So we are going to go ahead and jump into our chapters, where we're talking about chapters 10, 11, and 12, the final chapters of the book, Divorce Be Hard, Self-Worth Be Hard, and Lessons from 18 Years of Marriage. So in chapter 10, Divorce Be Hard, they actually address this statement. The Fredericks address the statement of divorce is not an option. Divorce is not an option, and how it is problematic. And I was like, okay, well, let's just come out swinging and saying the things that nobody in the room wants to say, but that everybody is thinking. I'm like, go ahead and throw this grenade. And on page 176, Melissa addresses it and says that there are 2 main problems with the phrase. 1, it's not true, and 2, it's actually counterproductive. And so she goes on to talk about the fact that it's counterproductive because instead of actually dealing with the issues that a marriage needs, it's just more so of giving a lazy kind of effort of, you ain't going nowhere, I ain't going nowhere, so this is what we're doing. So I really appreciated them addressing excuse me. I really appreciated them addressing this whole statement of divorce is not an option as if it's actually not an option. Like, no, it is an option. But again, as they've been talking about throughout the entirety of the book, that you really want to put in the work so that you're not consistently focusing towards or just immediately going to divorce as the option. I really enjoyed the fact that Melissa and Kevin both gave their perspectives of their marriage after the impact of Melissa's parents' divorce, because she actually gave us like a little bit more in details about how the news was broken to her, because I knew that Melissa found out that her parents were divorcing as she was an adult and had at least had her first child. And I think in the space of listening to the Love Hour when she was talking about it, and the fact that she's given a lot of space, time, and energy to the conversation around, she's given a lot of space, time, and energy around the conversation and around the subject of her parents divorcing. In my head, as someone who has experienced my mom and my first stepdad divorcing, and also being a product of my parents were never together, in terms of a marriage. I couldn't understand her, or, I could sympathize with her, but I couldn't really understand like where she was coming from and the depth of why it hit her to the core in the way that it did. But after reading after reading in the chapter how everything was broken down to her, like, how the news was essentially given, I can understand why it rocked her the way that it did, and the history behind that. So I was like, okay, well, chapter 10 did give me a little bit more of an insight, to an opportunity to be more empathetic for her. And I thought that, I was like, oh, okay. It gave me a, okay, I understand type of moment. But I think like the biggest takeaway of this chapter is that divorce is an option. But you make the choice to choose your relationship regularly, even in the midst of your partner's evolutions and other changes that happen in your relationship. And I think that's pretty much what they were driving at. So to sit here and say that divorce is not an option is more so like, quit saying it. It's a cop out. Like, divorce is an option, but you are working to choose not to divorce at the end of the day. So yeah, that was pretty much chapter 10 in a nutshell. Going on to chapter 11, self-worth be hard. Melissa pretty much took the reins of chapter 11 and pretty much gave this as a love letter from Melissa to the women readers of the chapter and to their husbands to gain better understanding of what their wives could possibly be going through and the influxes and things like that, and to possibly give vocabulary to people who may be going through the same thing that she is going through. And she starts the chapter off by defining, self-esteem and self-worth on page 183. Saying that self-esteem is the value we place on ourselves. And so she then goes and she takes us through, or she walks us through the process of how she had to work on her own self-esteem. She had to work on her own self-worth, and how she essentially had to learn how to affirm herself before ever receiving any type of affirmation of any sort from Kevin as her husband and as her partner, who loves her and wants to, just kind of give affirmation there as well. She addressed being worth it on page 187 and really working to find her worth. And she also talks about how we can all sometimes let me just read page 187 so you can understand where she's coming from. She says, we tend to think that we feel good about ourselves if we get to some not yet reached place in life or achieve some not yet attained goal. The truth is that you are enough as you are right here, right now. Even if nothing changes, you are worth it. And I thought that it was very much, I thought that she very much so stated it very well, in terms of talking about worth, in terms of talking about being worth it, that if only I had, the Louboutins, or if only I had the Gucci, or if only I was in this house, if only I had this man, if only I had the this dog or the picket fence or whatever have you. And she's saying that no, wherever it is that you are, right where you sit in the moment and the intensity of where you are in time and space as it pertains to right now, you are worth it just because. And there is that. And so in the space of talking about self-worth, she actually walks us through her own self-work that she did to get to these places of affirming herself and doing the work for herself. And she did so through these campaigns that she's talked about. She's talked about these campaigns on the Love Hour. She's also brought them here in this book. She gives like concise synopsises and summations of how she got to those moments and what really triggered it for her. And so she talks about the You Are Worth It campaign, the Love On campaign, the Make Me Over campaign, and the Sex Me Over campaign. And a lot of this, really spans into like the fact that she had to, kind of boost her self-esteem and then start to love on. And it was like an inside job. She had to love on herself from the outside and started picking features of herself that she actually adored, and then moving to other things that she didn't necessarily like. And then, actually thinking about like her closet space and the clothes that she had, and moving away from just having church wear and office wear in her closet, but also having things for like going out on a date with her husband, or even talking about like, sexy clothing, things of that nature, blah, 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 blah. So she goes through those backgrounds and the approaches, and she really just talks about how it, these processes took time and they revolutionized her and they evolved her in certain spaces. But I think that the main gist of the chapter is that building self-worth, worth and understanding your worth, was the primary crux of the chapter, and understanding that you are worth it is just the canvas to start with, and then you can add other things on, like the clothes, the makeup, the shoes, the lingerie, the whatever else, the husband, the kids, the dog, the whatever. So I thought that she summed it up. It was a lovely love letter to her younger self and those who identify with her in these spaces of self-worth and things of that nature. And I think that it was a very big, if anything, to take away from the chapter. Like, your self-worth is what is most important as you also enter into a relationship with someone else. You cannot depend on someone else to always give you the affirmation or the affirming that you feel as though you need. It needs to start from within, and then let everything else on the outside be additional. So that was pretty much that. Now, moving on to chapter 12, which is the lessons from 18 years of marriage. So in this chapter, they go through 15 lessons and of what they've learned over their 18 years of marriage. And they admonish couples to take reviews and inventories of their relationships on their anniversaries and at the end of their annual years, at least those 2 times in a year, to take inventory of their relationships and do the things to review it. But within the lessons of the 15 that they did, they had lots to say. Some lessons were longer than others, obviously, but they did, I want to say that within those lessons, they actually included some very standout tips. It's okay to keep your individuality in the midst of being a spouse and a parent, prioritizing your spouse, to make sure that you continue to get to know them, even in the space of adding children to it, because even though your children are your children and they take a lot of prioritizing, it is also important to keep the main thing, which is the relationship with your spouse. The children are a blessing, but also you are raising them to go. And when they leave, eventually it will just be you and your spouse, and you don't want to wake up and just be like, I don't know this person. So they talked about that. They talked about being flexible in seasonal changes with your spouse. Sometimes you're going to love the evolution of your spouse. Sometimes you're just going to be like, who is this that I'm married to now? But also understanding that that the change is inevitable, and to be flexible in the spaces of the changes. They discussed how even in the space of doing the inventory and things like that throughout the year, talking about what things you think you as a couple should start, what things do you believe you as a couple should stop, what things you should continue, and using that method as well. And I think making sure to create memories for things, like not forgetting to make those memories and experience, make those memories. They talked about wanting to make sure to create those memories and experiences together, to be able to have things to look back on, and also to, to reminisce on those things, and also to keep a lot of, there are moments and experiences that are also private for you that don't need to be shared with your family or with social media, and also understanding and learning how to understand between the two of those. But I think they wrapped up the chapter as well as the book in a lovely bow. On page 288 within the synopsis of the check-in prior to it asking the questions. And basically it says, as we look back on the 18 years of our marriage, we feel a whole host of emotions. The lessons we have learned ensure that we will be smarter and more thoughtful as we embark on the next 18, but we will make mistakes. That is a given. And those mistakes will lead to more lessons. The cycle will continue. And I just thought that it was really well stated that, in the space of what they've learned in their marriage is that it's a cycle of lessons learned or mistakes made, lessons learned, and being able to approach your relationship in smarter and thoughtful ways from the learning of those things. So yeah. Now I have to say this to you, friend. Lean in. Come here. We have officially finished Marriage Be Hard. Yay! So that is book number 2 finished for you, which we are so excited for, because as I've stated before, let me just go ahead and do the overall review for this book. As I've stated in our video for last week, this was starting to become a push for me to read. And I believe that the push for me to read it was coming from the space of the familiarity that I already had with them, being one that I follow both on social media, and I also followed them or followed their podcast when they were, on the Love Hour once a week or what have you. So it had become press because of the familiarity that I had with the content that they were discussing. In terms of the overall review that I have for the book, I think I will say this: it is funny to listen to, or funnier to listen to it than it is to read it. It is still funny if you read it, but you will get a kick out of the sound effects that Kevin Fredericks gives as he is also reading the audiobook. So I would just say, if you are one who wants to go back and listen to the sound effects and the foolishness that comes along with it, I would say listen to the book as opposed to reading it. But you guys know my model. I like to be able to actually underline things, take notes, and what have you. So I am a fan of paper. Again, I will say the first few chapters of the book, I was extremely excited for. I think my excitement started to wane about halfway through the book when I started to realize that the things that I was hoping for in the book wasn't necessarily there. Am I saying that this is a bad read? No, it's just not what I expected. I hope that they would talk about more things than what they had already talked about and discussed in the Love Hour podcast. But they are known for the content that they put on the Love Hour podcast. So, it makes sense that they would actually address the things in the book that way. As a couple that I know from their podcast that they were really big on trying to remove the stigma out of sex and have like these conversations as, you know, as growing up churchy and not necessarily having those discussions. That was something that really kind of led in the themes of this book, in terms of, you know, their past, their backgrounds, conversations they had with their parents versus what they wish they would have had, conversations they're having with their children, as well, how things between them as husband and wife are seen, how they both read intimacy versus not, things of that nature. So I felt like there was a lot more of the removing the stigma from sex that it was almost a little aggravating, just a skosh. I would have much rather talked about other things. In terms of, again, I talked about how like I thought that they would have addressed things like a gender roles or something like that, but I guess because they are so far into marriage that it may not be something that is like even a topic for them now, to speak about like gender roles and things like that, who, you know, or, you know, tasks that are considered to be done, because they are definitely an unconventional type of couple, even though they are traditional in this sense of like, in the sense of churchiness as well. So yeah, I just think that I will say this, I was expecting more than what I got, because what I got I'm already familiar with, and so I think that's where my review is for the book. So all in all, in terms of funniness and entertaining, I would say that this book is a 5 out of 5. But as it pertains to what I was expecting and what I would have want to see a little bit more of and discussions of, I definitely give it like a 3 out of 5. It's not bad, but it left me wanting more. So that's my review for the book as it is. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have for it. I don't have anything. I don't have anything else to really just kind of highlight or anything. Well, I will say this: Melissa is very much so reflective and things like that. She's very much the straight person in this particular book. Kevin is definitely the funny man. And sometimes I felt like I would have preferred to see a version of Kevin that was, he was very eloquent and loquacious about the things that he wanted to discuss, but it was very much so in the kind of situation. And I think I would have preferred, I think I really appreciated him in the space of being a father, talking about the seriousness of the things, being vulnerable with his boys, having to have the rough conversations about being a Black boy in America, and the fear that is around that as a father raising Black men. I really appreciated that, and I actually would have wanted a lot more of that from Kevin in the book, but you know, he's funny, so he does the funny things. But at the end of the day, that's pretty much my review. I'm really excited to get started with Candace Marie Bimbo's book, Red Lip Theology, for church girls who consider tithing to the beauty supply store when Sunday morning isn't enough. I'm excited for whatever triggers and things like that are coming down the line, because I am one who is triggered by Candace Marie Bimbo and some of the things that she says as a theologian. But I still want to read, because also support Black authors. But essentially that's pretty much all I have for the review of Marriage Heart, and for, you know, the upcoming books that I have. I'm excited to get to them, and we will do this all again next week. So until next time, saints and ain'ts, I'll be seeing you. Bye.